Hey guys, Ty here. So, after the last system, we already have the next one on our doorstep here. We're already starting to see heavy snow coming into play. That's not going to be the only thing that we're dealing with here. We still have to talk about the threat of severe weather, including an enhanced risk for day 3, which includes a large portion of Dixie Alley. So, both of these days are going to have to be watched very closely with an elevated tornado wind and even a hail threat as well. Stay tuned. Things are about to get interesting here. Hey everybody, Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully everyone's doing well. Hard to believe it's only Wednesday with the way the week has gone with the weather. It's already felt like it's been about 5 days instead of, well, 2.5 or 3. Depending on which time zone you're in by the time you're watching this video. But that being said here, I mean, based on the intro, we already kind of know the deal here. In some ways, this is like a carbon copy of the storms we had literally about 2 days ago. But there are some distinct differences that I'm going to get into as well. So for one, storm track is going to be different, and then also the people affected will be different consequently. And then, of course, just what kind of weather we will see still comes into play. So we already looked at the blizzard warnings, although there are a lot less of them, the winter storm watches, winter storm warnings, etc. So we're going to start out by looking at the severe weather here, and we're going to kind of go on from that point. So of course, as we mentioned before, there's a severe weather threat on Thursday, which we can actually look at the hazard types. We have the slight risk including Jackson, Mississippi. We have Greenville, Mississippi as well. Little Rock is in there as well. Lufkin, Texas is in there. Waco's just on the edge of that slight risk there. Just barely inside that marginal. And then also we have Shreveport in there as well. So some things to make note of is there is a hail threat off to the west. Not really surprising. Kind of like how the last storm was. The greatest potential for hail is going to really be more so off to the west, where those lapse rates are going to be a little bit higher. I do also think a decent chunk of Arkansas may see an increased threat for significant hail. Maybe not necessarily up to 2 inches, maybe just above or just under. But also keep in mind that last system that we were looking at did end up having storms that dropped baseball size hail and above. So don't let your guard down just because you don't see a hatch risk with the hail. The main threats, of course, though, with the next couple of days are going to be the wind threat and the tornado threat. Both of these are reaching slight risk criteria. Cannot talk today. Slight risk criteria here, though, but for the most part, they're pretty much matching or marrying those slight risk areas that we were looking at. For the tornado threat in particular, we're kind of a little bit further towards the south. It's a slightly more compact area, but there's still a lot of questions, still a lot of uncertainties with the storm mode. Because while I do see a little bit more in the way of subtle forcing and the chance for discrete supercells may potentially be a little bit higher, I think timing is also going to come into play with this system. The timing definitely looks like it could be an overnight threat, which could limit overall instability, but at the same time, I think with the negative tilt and the moisture return that we're getting, that's going to probably make it to where it doesn't matter too much. But of course, Mother Nature likes to work in mysterious ways. There's other environmental factors that even I probably can't get into. But that being said, this is looking at the following day where we have our enhanced risk now. This is enhanced risk, which I meant to actually post about earlier, but I was stuck at work. We have it stretching into parts of North Carolina, going all the way through South Carolina, central Georgia this time, as well as South Georgia, and then also South and Central Alabama as well. So like I said, that little bit of change in the storm track has kind of swept this heightened severe weather threat a little further to the north here. This was issued, I think, earlier this morning today. And then also, of course, we have maintained that slight risk that we were looking at in particular for the last day and a half or so. It doesn't come to too much surprise that I was honestly kind of calling for this area to probably end up getting an upgrade to enhanced risk. The jury's kind of still out for tomorrow's outlook, but I was kind of expecting this one, if I'm being honest. Not to try and toot my own horn or give myself a pat on the back here, but I'm not really surprised to see this. Wouldn't be too alarmed here, but for the most part, the threat is pretty much going to be the same across the board. It's going to mainly be tornado and wind threat. There is a slight, not really even a slight risk, but a marginal risk for hail. But pretty much going to be a similar deal. Strong mid-level jet is going to kick in across this area. There could be a couple of pockets where we get enough subtle forcing to where a few discrete storms form, but with that, there's also a couple other factors that come into play. Inhibition could also inhibit storm development with this too. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at some of these parameters here. Start out with the basics, of course, looking at the 500 millibar low-level jet. And there's a couple other things to make note of, kind of like how with the last system we had the potential for a nocturnal and early morning severe. I do think that that will be the case with this one once again. And we can actually kind of see that just based off of how this little setup is going here. I'm kind of concerned a little bit towards the Arkansas, Louisiana line here, just based off of the simple fact that we see what we call the ski jump kind of hanging around over here. Pressure's a little bit lighter over here too, so we'll have to see what happens with that. But fact of the matter is, we do start to see those storms fire. You can actually see even evidence of convergence and divergence here. You can see these little splits in between that little red part of the jet, and you see those little purple parts that are formed in between. That's air rushing away and rushing back in. So that being said, you can already kind of see the evidence of where the models want to have the thunderstorms at. And as time goes on, you can eventually even start to see where the front's going to end up being with this. And as we continue to go forward here, I really think the threat is going to shift further and further to the south as we go into the day here. Heavy rain is also going to be a high possibility, and then also the threat of flooding I'm concerned about as well, especially with areas further to the north. And then as this negatively tilted trough moves further off to the east here, I think this is going to help nullify the severe threat, but also kind of push it a little further inland towards the Carolinas here. Maybe even a piece of Virginia could see that. And just as quickly as that low rolls in, it's rolling out, but probably not before dropping some hefty snow over here towards the Midwest and towards the Great Lakes. So looking a little further down into the mid levels of the atmosphere, mainly looking for a pretty well-defined shortwave. I don't really see it on this model too much. I do see evidence of one potentially being there, but it's nothing that stands out to me. Definitely nothing like what I've seen more so during the spring or summertime. But nonetheless, though, there is something there. There's, of course, the evidence of convergence, divergence there too. Not really a surprise, but just the strength of what we see going on at the mid-levels is an eye-catcher too. Seeing these brighter colors, we're getting winds up to 70 knots, so we're talking close to about 80 miles an hour here. So, like I said, this definitely has that look of a very kinematically driven setup here. There's chances of instability being modest. For the most part, this definitely has the look of a high shear, low cape event for sure. It pretty much screams it at this point whenever you see something like this. Like I said, with the last storm system, this is not uncommon for this time of year to see that, but to see ones of this intensity it's impressive to say the least. So switching over to the 850, looking at the low level jet, this is where my concern for the tornado threat kind of increases a bit more, because we're going to go to that 03 to 06Z time frame, because right around the time, that's going to be right around the time where we're expecting these to ramp up. We got that 60 knot low level jet here, right along what I would consider to be the quad state line here between Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana here, and Oklahoma as well. So could see something get going here. Really, I think the storm mode is going to be a big factor. I do think there could be a confluence band that tries to develop here, and I think somewhere to the south of that is going to be the point of interest, just based off what I'm seeing on this model run. Keep in mind that trying to forecast a confluence band is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So this is prone to changing. So as we continue to go forward here, I think a lot of prefrontal storms are going to be possible. Maybe a lot of convection going on here, especially further to the south here. But even without the threat of severe thunderstorms, just the wind energy alone is going to be absolutely incredible across this whole region here. So you could even see damage without thunderstorms in general. Just non-thunderstorm winds could be damaging at this point. Seeing a low-level jet of 73 knots is not something you see very often. So it's just a testament to just how strong this storm is, and you can actually see based on the on these contour lines or isobars, whichever one you prefer to call them, just how strong this storm system is at the mid to lower levels of the atmosphere here. So across the board, we'll look at the temperatures here. You'll be able to see where our frontal boundary is just based on how that warm air starts to react as that storm system rolls closer. You'll be able to see the contrast between the or even what I would call the battle between the warm and cold air. Here it is right here. And you can see where the storms end up firing in these little blotches, like right here, for example, where I'm looking. And you can see that continue to become a prevalent thing as we continue to go forward. And it's really where we see these red colors here. We're getting into the 60s and 70s, where I'm thinking the threat for severe weather will be greatest. Could see a couple of rounds possibly further to the south. A little further to the north, I could mainly see maybe one round, if even that. Like I said, there's a lot of conditional parameters a little further to the north. And then after that, we'll watch that cold air take over. All while in the meanwhile, snow is going to be pretty rampant as we go through the next couple of days through the Midwest and then eventually into the Great Lakes. So here's one stark difference from the storm earlier this week compared to what we're expecting. Like I said, wind energy is going to be pretty high, but I just don't see the same kind of intensity with the winds starting out here. I do think maybe towards the central plains here could maybe see a little bit more along the lines of maybe closer to blizzard conditions. Those winds just aren't really as strong. It's a little bit further to the south here. We could get that snow further to the south, we could be talking a different story here. But like I said, the track of the low is going to really be a big factor in all of this. The tilt axis of the trough, I think, for the most part, will remain the same. But then again, with the last system, we thought it too was going to be strongly negative tilt, but it ended up going a little bit more so towards the neutral tilt. There's a word for that, but I just can't seem to think of it right now. I apologize for that. But as we continue to go forward here, we do end up seeing those 30 to 40 mile per hour gusts here, and they do hang around for a while. So it's not that blizzard conditions aren't possible, but they could come into play. Now keep in mind, blizzard is a longer duration event, so just because you see it for maybe like an hour or so, it does not fully make it a blizzard. About 3 or 4 hours is the requirement, if I remember correctly. But like I said, just the wind energy alone is going to be absolutely incredible with this storm system. Even as we get into the weekend, it's still going to be hanging around, even over towards the northeast. So, and whoa, even seeing a 75 mile per hour wind gust here, just offshore here towards the far reaches of the mid-Atlantic, getting into that northeast region here. It's going to be crazy. And that's pretty much hurricane force here at this point too. So that's wild. I mean, I've looked at the model a little bit, but I didn't see that value there. So that's pretty crazy to say the least. All right, so now we're going to get a little bit more in depth with the severe weather side of things. We're going to be looking mainly at our moisture returns at this point here. So of course we're looking at the M3 kilometer, and by morning we'll probably do an update video, but we'll mainly be looking at HRRR at this point. So we'll get a little bit of a comparison between the two. But you can see as we're getting into the evening overnight hours, there's that good moisture return, getting into those lower 60s right here. And for the most part, we're going to see a good bit of potential for storms to develop, even as we get into the early morning hours of Friday here. And it's really not going to slow down across this region of the Ozarks until we get probably 8, maybe 9 o'clock central. And then we can see that moisture return holding up really well as we get into Mississippi by the late morning hours, and then eventually further along into the southeast. We'll continue this on into the next window where we have it set up for this part of the southeast. So here's that moisture return coming in, and look how much moisture we end up getting from the Gulf here. That's the thing that I think is going to help aid these storms to be able to continue onward into the overnight hours here, because you'll be able to see some of that cape coming in too along with this. I mean, usually when you see the temperature and the dew point doing something like this, it's always an eye opener for sure, or it's a brow raiser, as I would want to call it. But I mean, pretty much the evidence looks like it's there based off of what I'm seeing on the model guidance. But is this a shoo-in? I'm still not going to say yes yet. But one thing I do find interesting is that it's a little bit drier up further to the north here, towards where we have some of that enhanced risk. So I do have some questions with that one. It's a little bit of digging around that I'm going to have to do in my spare time in order to kind of figure that out a little bit more. But fact in the matter is still, towards the end of the day on Friday, we could still see some pretty significant weather over here off to the southeast, especially up towards the coast of the Carolinas once again. So looking through the moisture returns now, it's starting to get into some other factors here like cloud cover, which I think will come into play. I think cloud cover is going to be a big thing, but I don't think it's going to necessarily inhibit. So this is us looking at potential cloud cover as the storm system rolls in. I do see a couple of pockets of clearing, but like I said, this isn't going to be as prevalent. If this was more of a daytime setup, I would be more concerned about this, but I was just really more or less wanting to take a look here. I'm trying to find a potential area where we could see maybe an elevated mixed layer trying to form, because then that would definitely ramp up the tornado threat. And there are a couple pockets that I'm a little bit leery of, but I just don't necessarily have the evidence to say, okay, this is definitely doing this or it's doing that right now. It's these little clear slots that I'm trying to keep an extra close eye on at this point. I just don't know if we're going to end up getting that or not. The cloud cover is going to definitely come into play here from the looks of it, though. So now let's go ahead and look at our instability and then kind of go on from that point here. So we're going to look at multiple parameters here. We're going to start out with our mixed layer cape, starting out with Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and of course Oklahoma. Like I said, it's not going to really be a high cape event. You could see some values getting into the 500s to 600s and beyond, but it's really not going to increase too immensely unless we get further out to the east here. And even then, I think some of that really rich cape is going to be further off to the south here. You could see a couple of pockets here and there where we get up to about 1,000 joules per kilogram, but it's really not going to be a whole lot. And mostly by the time we get to that more rich instability, we're going to probably be looking at more of a linear mode than anything else here, and maybe even a threat for hail too. Like I said, the hail threat isn't necessarily zero as we go into Friday either, but I think that the hail threat might be a little bit more impressive tomorrow than anything else. So this is what we were looking at over towards Texas. This is a little further off to the east here. I'm going to just pretty much go ahead and jump this forward. And like I said, pretty much a similar deal across the southeast here. Really more so towards Florida is where we have those higher cape values. But again, it's going to be in a spot where the kinematics aren't quite as impressive. It's going to be one of those weird events where kinematics are going to be better to the north, thermodynamics are going to be better to the south here. If you get a little bit of a flashpoint between the two, that's where I think the greatest tornado risk is, and just really the severe weather threat in general. But it's going to really be more so around here where I'm most interested, but you just don't really see anything in the mix there right now. Could this be wrong? Of course. We're probably going to be seeing an update in the next little bit here. A new run will come in for all of this, and the game may change just with that alone. So also another thing I'm interested in looking at here is the convective inhibition. is there going to be a cap in place? That's what I'm trying to find out. If we have a capping inversion, this could slow down storm development. We do see a little bit try to get going here. Not a super strong cap, but this breaks a bit here as we get later into the day. And then slightly out ahead of it, it looks like we don't get too much in the way of inhibition from that point onward. So we'll go ahead and shift this on over. So here we go, looking at the southeast at this point. Basically, the brighter the colors, the stronger the inhibition, so this would be more likely to limit storm development. And you just kind of see that just shriveling away. You see a little bit more in the way of inhibition off to the south here, but as that front comes in, just kind of whizzes that cap away. But my concern is, even if you get a weak cap, it can hold those storms off at bay and maybe increase the explosive nature within the atmosphere. So still, like I said, there's a couple of questions here. But for the most part, I don't think inhibition is going to be a huge inhibiting factor, nor will it be a helping factor in aiding increased thunderstorm growth. So I guess now, in the meantime, we'll go ahead and look at our helicities here. Or actually, no, we're going to look at one parameter here, the significant tornado parameter, real quick. I don't like looking at it too much. We're not going to read into it too heavily, but this could give us an idea of where some of the most impressive severe conditions could be. So we're going to go ahead and jump this forward, starting out. Uh-oh, didn't mean to do that. So this is when we would expect some good storm initiation here, and like I said, it doesn't really look like starting out we get a lot of good parameters, but look what happens as we get later towards the day, and it's right where I would expect it to be, a little further to the south. Let's go ahead and get a good sounding here. This looks pretty good, actually, as far as photograph. It's not the most impressive I've seen, but if things do actually go right with this, we could have something a little bit more on the significant side. I don't quite think the ceiling is quite as high as what this is portraying here, but this skew T does have the look of a slightly more loaded sounding here too. But like I said, a lot of uncertainty with this still. As much as I want to have some confidence in it and say this is going to happen, I just don't really see it right now. But the potential is definitely still there. Like I said, it's a high ceiling type of day, but it could be a conditional one. So as we continue to go on here, see those values increase briefly, and then eventually, and this is what I'm kind of concerned about towards the Carolinas, pretty much a repeat of the other day. We might see a little bit of onshore activity towards the Hatteras here, but like I said, I think that timing isn't going to quite match up based off what I'm seeing on the NAM, I should say, excuse me. So with that in mind here, we're going to go ahead and look at what the reflectivity will look like for everybody across the board here and go from there. So we'll go and look both at the the potential winter storm, maybe even blizzard conditions, and severe weather. So here is one area of low pressure. This is going to be bringing in this is almost going to be like kind of a clipper system, but it's going to help set the stage here. Here is our catalyst right here for the big storm, and you can see that heavy snow beginning to develop, storm starting to fire off late in the evening into the early morning hours here. Then eventually this could be what this is the start of our severe event. And then, like I said, if you look around here, you can kind of see convection ongoing here, and really it's this mode that I'm kind of just side-eyeing, just waiting to see what really happens with that. If this can verify and these storms can really get themselves organized, this could be a tornado outbreak, possibly. I normally try not to use that word, but like I said, if we can get some clearing between this front here and some decent convection, not crap vection, some good quality convection here, we could see some discrete supercells, and the tornado threat will undoubtedly increase. So we could see a couple of different rounds of storms here. And with that also, it looks like there could be a more prevalent storm threat further off to the north than what's being shown right now. So like I said, a lot of stuff up in the air right now. I think it's very conditional still at this point in time. We really aren't going to know until probably the day of, I should say. One thing that I am very confident in is the amount of snow that we're going to be seeing here across the northern parts of the U.S. here, especially towards the Great Lakes and the Midwest. Could be some significant snowfall here. In fact, that's pretty much likely. Will we see blizzard conditions? I think that it's very probable. I think that it's probable. Will it be a full-on blizzard? Kind of leaning towards no right now, but we'll have to see how that plays out. But either way, going to be treacherous times out here up towards the Ohio Valley here as time goes on here. Originally, I was even kind of counting them out, writing them off on this wintry system. It looks like we've kind of turned back towards you guys more now. And then, of course, if you're over towards the interior northeast and towards the coast, it looks like you're going to probably start out as rain. Maybe you'll end out as snow, but it's definitely not going to be anything like the system that we had to end last week for sure. So I guess the next couple of things we're going to do here is go over the flooding threat and also the snowfall totals real quick. Alright, so here we are looking at the potential for rainfall here. Some of these areas do get kind of caught up with the snowfall here. This doesn't necessarily specify what mode of precipitation here. So we're mainly going to be looking at the areas where we're expecting mostly severe weather here. Towards the southern tip of the Ohio Valley here, we could expect some heavy rain here as well. I do have my concerns with this area. I do think that there's a chance that some of this will be, these totals will be higher in local areas here. But mainly, in particular, up towards the Mississippi River Basin seems like it's going to be the hot spot here. Some of the heaviest rainfall, maybe up to an inch or two, could be possible here. Given the fact that we've had a couple of big storm systems come through, it's really not going to take that much for flooding to occur. This isn't really a huge signal towards flash flooding, but it's definitely something that we'll still have to be watching over time here. The National Weather Service blend of models is a little bit more aggressive with this, which I kind of agree with, if I'm being honest, in comparison to what we were seeing with NAM 3 kilometer. It might be downplaying this event just slightly, but we'll honestly just have to see what happens with it. Because like I said, still a couple of environmental parameters that could slow this storm down. But if we look at the British models, were much more aggressive. Euro's a little bit more aggressive, along with the Canadian. GFS is also more aggressive, but when we get towards Icon and the NAM, we're slightly less aggressive. And then there's a couple of changes in track here from the looks of it as well. So now we've looked at all that. We'll go ahead and switch over to snowfall now, where we have some pretty impressive looks over here towards Minnesota and Iowa in particular. Eastern Nebraska looks like there's a healthy dollop of snow for you guys. Of course, over towards the Great Lakes, significant snow seems to be possible here. And as of course, we've been dealing with out west. The snow machine's been on for a while, and it does not look like it's slowing down anytime soon for you guys. Northeast is still a question mark to me as to what happens with that one. We could still see some decent action just off the Great Lakes here. The interior is really where I'm kind of scratching my head as to what happens next. We look at the British model here, pretty much concurrent, albeit the totals are a little bit more aggressive. It's typical. Great Lakes, especially towards Lake Michigan, could be some significant snow there based off the Euro. Canadian model, the GDPS, is a little bit more aggressive towards the Midwest. GFS is a little bit more aggressive towards the Midwest as well. And then the Central Plains also is a little, and the Midwest is also coming into play for the Icon, and then also the NAM. So like I said, models are kind of fluctuating all over the place, but the general consensus seems to be really more so over here, where we get that heavier snow, I should say. So that's going to be an area of interest as well. That's all I got for you guys on this one. I know this was a long video. Oh wait, no I don't. Almost forgot to put in the blend of models for this one. But for the most part, with the blend of models, we're looking pretty congruent with the others, thankfully. Thing to make note of here is, of course, the lake effect swaths right here, where we could even see up to a foot of snow. That might have to be something we watch real close as well. So like I said, this could be another winter and severe weather stream at least one of the days, if not both. I'm kind of in between a rock and a hard place with my work schedule, and on top of that, my job also does not have direct deposit, so I actually have to physically be there to get my check. So Friday could be a little sketch for me, but we'll see what happens with that. It could be we may end up missing the stream, we may not. I'll see how things play out here. But that being said, I'm gonna call it a night. I'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll definitely try to stream tomorrow night if it's at all possible, and then we'll go on from there and see what happens next. Till next time, it's been Tyler Metalhead Weatherman. Appreciate all of you being here. If you've watched to the end, definitely hit that like button. And if you haven't already and you've watched to the end, come on, why not subscribe? But till next time, take care. Horns up. I'll see you later.